You are listening to the Fly the W670 podcast. This is season 3. It's episode number 6. Jed and Carter on the 2023, the offseason, and the path forward. Don't forget to download, listen, review. Most importantly, subscribe to the podcast. Follow us on the socials. Follow the Fly the W670 on Twitter, Instagram. Of course, we're on Facebook. And email us at flythew670 at gmail.com. Crawly, happy Thursday, pal.
Oh man, my voice is slowly coming back. I don't sound like a frog as bad anymore. So I think it's the recovery from CubsCon every year it takes a little bit longer for me. So
what are you saying? It takes a little bit longer to recover, huh?
a little bit longer. I don't have youth on my side anymore. I got to find some like young interns to help me out at CubsCon so that I get a little bit of rest, maybe a nap or two in there.
Yeah, little nap never hurt anybody. There's no doubt about that. So we've got a lot to talk about, starting with what we heard, a little bit deeper dive with Jed and Carter.
Yeah, on the last podcast, we had the Shota Imanaga press conference, which was awesome. Opening ceremonies. We talked with Cole Wright. But in this episode, we're going to look a little bit deeper into those comments made by Jed and Carter. Now, we heard from Jed when the season ended. He does the autopsy, and then we heard both of them in the winter meetings. But to me, Dustin, it's like the Cubs convention. This is what's special about it. It allows fans to hear, their thoughts, and they have to be careful about what they say. There's certain rules regarding what they can say as far as free agents and stuff like that and tampering. But, they're pretty honest when you listen to what they have to say. And so, we took some of the clips from last weekend. Jed and Carter talked with 670, The Score. Was it a Mully and Haw show, right?
Mm-hmm.
And on different panels and all that stuff. So we got some good things, and there was just kind of some themes that we kind of grouped things into. We talked about 2023 coming up a little bit short, and I think a real big part of that was the amount of blown leads at the end of the season, Dustin, and some of that was due to free agents not panning out, players that took a step back, some young players couldn't get it done at the major league level, and then obviously overuse and injuries. And so when we looked at all the problems that they had, this is what one player said about the bullpen.
I mean, if you look to when we were playing our best ball, other than kind of right after the All-Star break, right, we were scoring, 40 runs a game almost. Like I feel like we were pummeling teams. But a lot of, when we started having that success, I want to say it was the early parts of June. I think we were out in San Francisco. That's kind of when the run started. It wasn't just like a 9-2 cruise games, right? Like there was a lot of 5-3s, right, 4-1s, 7-6. There's a lot of close games. So when that happens, no one's able to get off their feet. The bullpen guys are having to be ready. The position guys have to stay. There's just so many things of like, I got to keep my best players out there even for the duration of the game, because you'd like to be able to, be up 10-1. Take a couple innings off, and that really kind of helps add some fuel at the end of the year. And same for the bullpen guys, right? Like, Merriweather, Leiter, and Alzolay are having to throw, each and every day, and Fulmer's throwing a ton. And we had so many guys that were warriors for 3 months, but we just couldn't sustain it at the end because we just didn't do a good enough job on ourselves to, early on to capitalize on that. And I think that's where we're just talking about with the depth with Shota and, you hopefully they can build some depth in the bullpen, and all of a sudden you can put different guys in different spots to be able to trust that they can get outs, and we can have a better year. I mean, if you look to when we were playing our best ball, other than.
So as we kind of listened to that clip right there, I mean, it was clear, like at the beginning of the season, you didn't have like the bullpen wasn't established, right? It really, and there was a lot of blown saves. I don't think anyone really knew their role. And part of that big run that they were talking about there happens around June on a West Coast trip. And San Francisco is accurate. And then all of a sudden they go on this run, but they were 10 games under, Dustin. They looked dead in the water. And now they had to work their tail off to get back into it. And every guy has to play every game just to get back into it. And then, those names that he mentioned, I think when the Cubs were doing their best, you had some combination of, Merriweather, Leiter, and Alzolay, 7, 8, 9. But those are guys that weren't used to having to go all those high leverage innings. And sure enough, Alzolay was down at the beginning of September. You saw Merriweather was the one that stuck around, but it looked like Leiter Jr. ran out of gas. He seemed to have some bumps and bruises. I don't know if, everyone does at that time, but he just kind of ran out of gas themselves. And so I think, when you think about it, these are the people, Dustin, that were all in the bullpen. Alzolay, Assad, Nick Birdie, Jose Quas, Jeremiah Estrada, Michael Fulmer, Brandon Hughes, Anthony Kay, Caleb Killian, Mark Leiter, Luke Little, Julian Merriweather, Michael Rucker, and Drew Smiley. And so there was just this big kind of rotation, but it wasn't like anybody you could really, there wasn't a lot of confidence in a lot of guys not named Alzolay and Leiter and Merriweather.
Right. And a lot of guys, they also had made the point that they wanted to have all their best arms up at the major league level. And guys have to learn, right? These are new things, like you said. A lot of guys, and it seemed like everybody was probably in one inning earlier than they probably should be in a perfect setup, right?
Right. And so,
everybody was pitching in one higher of a leverage situation than they're probably set up to do, at least at this point in their career.
And we saw that when the Cubs got Chapman, and then that pushed Rondon back to 8, and it pushed Strope back to 7, and it just lengthened out the bullpen like you're talking about.
Right. Exactly right.
And this is what, Jed said that talking about the priority of getting more bullpen arms.
We've offered some this offseason. It's not my favorite thing, in general. But certainly the bullpen is an area of priority. It's a hard area. You can look at some teams that have built through multi-year deals that have struggled, and you look at some teams that have built through this smart targeted transactions that have had a lot of success. So there's a lot of ways to skin the bullpen cat, but we do need to focus on it. It was an Achilles heel last year for sure.
I mean, that's pretty serious when you call it an Achilles heel, right?
Yeah. There was no sugarcoating it there. Very direct.
And we talked about this on the show. Brandon Hughes was going to be the lefty, and he was hurt, and he never got on track. And so you had no lefty out of the bullpen. Anthony Kay was given a shot, later on Luke Little, who again was just getting his first taste of the bigs. And so, you didn't have a lot of left-handed pitchers. And then Brad Boxberger was a guy that was really supposed to be the one that was going to be the difference maker. That was the guy that was going to kind of be the anchor. I think in Jed's world and bullpens, Jed brings this up a lot, are very volatile. It kind of it kind of evolves itself. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. But I think in an ideal world, Jed had Boxberger at 9 and Fulmer at 8. And Boxberger was just a disaster, and Fulmer had his moments. I think he was up and down a lot. He had some, good moments, some not so good moments, but I thought those two were supposed to be the anchors, and those were the guys with experience, Dustin, and really they weren't guys that you could count on at all during the season, really.
No, could not. We'll see what happens. I mean, there's still plenty of time to build this thing, right?
Yeah.
And you have to give them the time. I mean, there's other pressing. Everything is important. This just might not be the most important thing right this second, but it all matters. It all matters at the end of the day.
Right. And one thing is that Bruce Levine was doing inside the clubhouse and, talking about the possibility of trading and then the name that keeps coming up. And I heard it, I think it was yesterday morning, Emmanuel Klaus from the Guardians. He was up there. Bruce mentioned the Astros, Ryne Sandberg, and then the Mets, Adam Ottavino, who I swear the Cubs were in on years ago, like 6-7 years ago. He was with the Mets. But, a veteran presence, I think, is going to be something that you really kind of want to have here. And I think any one of those guys, now Klaus from Cleveland is going to cost you. That's going to be a painful one. But the Cubs, as we're going to talk about later, have prospects if you're willing to make the trade. I always felt that Jed really has done a good job with bullpens. This was the one year that just didn't happen. Like I said, a couple guys just didn't pan out, Boxberger primarily. But when Jed and Carter were talking about bullpens, I thought I talked about this on the last episode. I really was impressed with Carter Hawkins. He talked about the bullpen usage and how it had changed. And this is what he had to say.
Last year, I thought that we got tired. It was a strange season that way. Early in the season, our bullpen was fine. We had the bad 45-day stretch, sort of May and early June, when the bullpen struggled, and then they struggled again in September. I think some of that was not having enough depth down there. And then some of that was the fact that we were winning every game for 3 months, and that takes a toll on the bullpen. Like I said, we didn't have the depth to get through that, and that's a big focus. Both making sure our guys that come up through the system can handle that depth, and also making sure we add that depth in free agency and trade before the season. But the game has changed so much now. It used to be that you could kind of pencil in your rotation. We used to always talk about, can we get 950 to 1,000 innings out of the rotation? I mean, that feels like 100 years ago. You have to have so many arms to win the battle now. It's not just about the 13 guys we pencil in. It's probably closer to 25 or 30, and the team that can get through the battle is gonna be effective now. So the game has changed. The velocity has changed. The way people pitch. I mean, talking to our new manager about it. I mean, yeah, he wants to give guys extra rest. He's not looking for guys to be pitching 170, 180 innings. He knows that 120 to 140 is probably a lot. How do we mix and match all the guys to get through the 1440 of the year? And it's a real challenge now. And I think that is where the job has changed the most. That almost every night we're talking about a roster move. Is it, are we fresh enough? Do we need to get a pitcher? That was never the case. Now it's very rare you don't use 4 and 5 pitchers in every single game. And that's not just the Cubs, that's everybody. So it's definitely a very different perspective on team building than it used to be, even, looking at 2016 when we had, you just had Lester and Jake and Lackey and Hamill and Hendricks eating up so many innings. Like, no one in baseball has that anymore.
I mean, that's when you think about it, we were talking Fergie Jenkins when he got his statue, how many times he pitched 200 innings. And now it's just becoming a rarity. And now Jed's saying 120, 140, and you hear everybody talking about the fact that you're only going to let your starter go 3 times through the order. And so as you look at that, Dustin, I looked at the records of the Cubs in 2023. When they led in the 6th inning, they were 11-13. When they were tied in the 6th inning, they were 11-13. When they were tied in the 7th, they were 7-12. When they were tied in the 8th, they were 7-8. When they were tied in the 9th, they were 3-7. Extra inning games, they were 3-6. 1-run games, they were 21-24. 2-run games, they were 9-17. So it seems like every close game, Dustin, they lost a lot of close games. And that's, part of it's going to be on the offense. You got to score more runs. But at the same time, if you're tied, you also have an opportunity to win that. And they just didn't do that a lot.
No, those are some great statistics that you're sharing about what guys did in the different innings and different usages. And yeah, everybody's got to be, of a mindset. To me, I don't get it. I want to talk to Tommy Hotovy about it more. I don't understand why you can't just be given the ball, go get the guy out. Like, why does it matter? Like, there's a guy on base and it's the 9th inning, it's the 7th inning, it's the 6th. Here's the ball. Get on the mound, get the guy out that's up to bat. I just don't, I don't get it. Like, everybody has a job to do, right? And like, it usually doesn't change based on the hour of the day that you're in. Like, okay, because you're in your 7th hour of your workday, you're expected to do more or less than you were in hour number 2 of your workday. Now, your responsibilities could change, of course, but at the end of the day, usually it's the same thing. Crawly, your big boy job is to teach kids, right? Right. It doesn't matter. It doesn't change. Like, how you teach them doesn't change in 6th period versus what it did in 2nd period. Now, it might be a different age kid. It might be a different subject, but at the end of the day, it's teaching. Here's the ball, get the batter out.
It'd be interesting to talk to Tommy about that, or maybe, and then kind of compare that to what a veteran pitcher might say. You know what I mean? Like, back in the day, it's a different mentality. I think it's kind of, I wouldn't be an expert on it, but maybe how they came up, how they've been coached through all these different leagues and everything like that. I mean, possibility. 2 players from last year that I think are going to be a big part of the story this year, and they talked about them, was Seiya Suzuki and Christopher Morel. Dustin, if you remember, Seiya came to camp last season all buff, ready to play in the WBC, and an oblique injury knocks him off. he did okay and started to pick it up, but then he went into a horrific slump and he got benched. And after that benching, Seiya played like a man possessed. And this is what, and there's an interesting story of how he got back on track. This is what Jed had to say about that.
Ultimately, when you look at a team that outproduces its expectations, you look at our projections at the beginning of the year. In order to win, the teams that go, further than expected, those are always going to be teams that a couple players, they're projected for 2.5. They go to 4.5 wins, right? And so you have to expect that. And I think Seiya is one of those guys that can definitely do that. He's immensely talented. He really is. I think what we saw at the end of the year hopefully was a harbinger of things to come, where he's starting to get comfortable. Kind of a funny story. We're talking about velocity, and the struggle for him early last year, and some of the time over here was just putting the ball on the ground. His exit velocities are elite. He's hitting the ball 107 miles an hour, but it's on one hop to the shortstop. And so that was kind of what he was working on. How do I get the ball in the air more, especially to the pull side? And so things started to click for him. And obviously he had a monster August and September, and he was getting the ball in the air more. And I was asking those guys, like, hey, what changed? Like, what was the big moment? And the big moment was he was struggling, and we're playing the Reds. I think it was early August, like right after the deadline. And it was one of those games. We scored 19, 20 runs in a couple of those games. And he was facing a position player pitching at the end of the game. And he was just like, okay, this swing nice and smooth, catch the ball out front. The guy's throwing 58 miles an hour, and he hit a huge homer. What's that?
The guy throwing 58 won't get hurt, by the way.
Yeah. And so he hit a long home run against a position player, and it was like, that was it. That's the swing. Catch it out front. And from that day forward, he took off, which is great. So it's amazing when people talk about like what those moments are that things click. It was just like thinking about catching the ball out front. And so my hope, and our hope, obviously, is that, he had a year and a half to transition. It's a hard transition, but that we saw the player he can be. Because I do think he's got one of the best right-handed swings in baseball. He's so tooled up. Our hope is that he can really start taking off now.
Did you hear that, Dustin? One of the best right-hand swings in baseball.
Yeah, that's
mighty big praise.
It's really big praise. Really big praise.
But Dustin, I was looking at this in the first month back for Seiya Suzuki in May, first full month. He came like mid-April. I just looked at the month of May. He hit 319. Then in June, he hit 177. In July, he hit 240. And then that game that Jed's talking about was August 2nd versus the Reds. He hit that home run. And from that point, in August, he hit 321. And in September, he hit 370. So, when Jed was talking about guys, if you're going to be a winning team, certain guys have to outperform. Seiya's going to have to be one of those guys.
Mm-hmm. No doubt about it. No doubt.
I think there's more in the tank, and I'm very interested to see what happens. Now, one of the names that, that we've kind of taken a look at is Christopher Morel. And Dustin, you and I were a little shocked last year, start of the season. He's in Iowa, right?
Yep.
Gets called up in May, and he does what he continues to do, hit home runs. The question with Morel is, where does he play? Now, he's been the subject of trade rumors all winter long. There hasn't been, he's been tied to so many different trades with so many different teams, Cleveland, the Mets, go down the list. But right now, the Cubs saw him play first and third in the Dominican Winter League. But where he plays, or if he plays for the Cubs in 2024, still is unknown. Carter had an interesting comparison to Morel, and I really liked Carter's answer on this one.
We had similar questions, and I don't want to compare talents because it's not fair to Mo, but similar questions of where's Jose Ramirez going to play? Back in 2014, 2015. He was a shortstop coming up. Lindor's playing shortstop. He could play second. Kipnis was playing second. Can he play third? Well, we have some pretty good third basemen. Can he play the outfield? I don't know, but we think this guy can hit. We're going to figure out a way to get him into the lineup. And I think it's a really similar question that we're working through with Chris, which is he can hit. we have to figure out ways to get him in the lineup. That's why we had him working at first base in the offseason. The Dominican sent coaches down there. That's why he's working in multiple different positions. If you have a bat that will play in the major leagues, we will find a spot for you to play in the major leagues. We've all seen that he's able to move around. I was talking on the Score yesterday, and I was saying something similar to this, and they said, are you filibustering right now? And it's like, no, I'm just literally going through all of our different positions and realizing, if he can step up at any of those, his bat is going to be something that just forces us to pencil him in the lineup. Worst case, he DHs a lot. Best case, he's playing great defense for us. He certainly has the athleticism, the hands, the ability to do it. I think there's an opportunity for him to be a great all-around player, and that's the thing that we're going to work on really hard for this offseason.
Now, Dustin, I'm sitting here and I'm listening to him, and he's right. Second and short are taken. Outfield spots are taken. So what does that leave him? It leaves him first, third, and DH. And so it has to be one of those three. And I keep kind of getting mixed messages. Is it good for him to be toolsy, or do they want him to play one place at the same time, one position, and just focus on that? I think with the signing of Michael Busch, it doesn't mean anything because Michael Busch hasn't proven it in the major league level yet.
Right.
But
hopefully, right. Yet's the key word, right? Mm-hmm.
But I mean, other than DH, I just don't see where you would put him, right?
Right. Well, here's the thing. If they were playing, we had this on the Score today. David Haw and I had a little back and forth on this. The Cubs had to play a game this Sunday, opening day, this Sunday. Who's playing third base based on the roster today? Who's playing third base? I think it's one, in my opinion, it's one of two people, but I want to hear your opinion. And we didn't plan on this, so I apologize that I'm kind of.
No. I was listening this morning. I listened this morning. I heard the fingernail debate, but
yeah,
we won't go there. But I think
we can if you want, but
I think Morel would definitely. You got to give him a try. If he's going to be on the team, that's where he's got to be. That's just where I kind of sit there now.
So where is he playing?
Third base.
Third base. Okay, so your opening day third baseman is Christopher Morel. Okay, that's fine. Your opening day first baseman is?
I would say, and I'm going to talk about this in a little bit, but I would say I would platoon Michael Busch and Patrick Wisdom.
Okay, and then who's DHing?
At that point, I'd have to take a look, but I think you can kind of rotate those guys around a little bit. You know what I mean? Depending on the situation, righties, lefties, playing matchups.
Okay.
I don't think
and then PCA is obviously in center field for you.
Yes.
All right. And Nick Madrigal is your pinch hitter.
You could have Nick Madrigal as a pinch hitter. Mike Tauchman's still on the team. And I think Mike Tauchman's going to do better. So, I mean, I think you could see, I got a feeling we might see a couple more platoons this year in center field to start off.
I'm saying that doesn't really, as a season ticket holder, Crawly, and as a longtime Cubs fan, that opening day lineup doesn't do a whole hell of a lot for you, does it?
Not yet. I think there's moves to be made still. And so, Jed,
but I think a couple of the guys, and part of this, and we're going to get into this later in the podcast, we're talking about the Cubs having 5 prospects in the top 50. Okay. Five prospects in the top 50. But to me, 2 of the 5 are really not prospects because they need to be playing on opening day at this point.
Right. And they'll be graduated up, and the Cubs still have a lot coming through. But Jed did talk about this slow off season, and it has been absolutely slow. And this is what Jed had to say.
Some off seasons are really fast and some are slow. And this has been a slow one. And, obviously there's really good players out there. We've made a couple moves. I think we have a few more in us for sure, but you can't speed it up.
Right.
I think our job is to get good deals, not to just do deals. I mean, anyone can do a deal. Anyone can say yes, to the agent's asking price. If you do that, then you're going to run out of money really quickly, And so, he's trying to get the right deal for the organization. That's our job, is to invest, Tom and the family's money as wisely as we can, and we're going to do that. So we can't speed it up, but obviously there's really good players out there, and we have to be somewhat patient.
Slow is an understatement, Dustin. I mean,
it's like going uphill. That's how slow it is.
Right. Basically,
it's almost in reverse.
From the end of October, from the beginning of October, October 1st until January 5th, the Cubs did not sign a single player to their major league roster. They were the last team to sign a team to the major league roster. And so if you're looking at that, the Cubs made their first move on January 5th, claiming Ryne Sandberg off waivers from Colorado. The first big move came with the signing of Shodi Managa. That's January 9th, Dustin. That's 3 days before CubsCon, a little over a week ago. And then they made a trade the same day to get Michael Busch and reliever Yancy Almonte. Giving up Jackson Ferris was the big piece on that one. And then poor Ryne Sandberg, who was the first one that the waiver claimed, they had to DFA him for Imanaga. So, I mean, there are players out there, and it should be interesting. When you talk about Imanaga, we talked about him last time. You have more lefties in the rotation this year than righties, technically. If you're talking about today's rotation. And, the pitching philosopher, I mean, I think he's a guy that we're both excited about. And from the clip that we played earlier about Jed, 140 innings, I think Imanaga can hit that. I don't think he can hit, 180 or anything like that. I think 140 is more reasonable. The other one, Dustin, that you talked about was Michael Busch. He's a 26-year-old who is one of the Dodgers' top prospects, one of the top prospects in all of baseball, but he was blocked by Freddie Freeman. You know what I mean? You're not playing ahead of Freddie Freeman. And so Busch, they tried playing him in second base. He's 6'1", 210 pounds. He's a lefty, much better hitter than a defender, so to speak. And so, like I said, the Dodgers tried to shoehorn him in at second where they had a need. And that's very similar to Morel. You know what I mean? Like sometimes you just try to shoehorn a guy in. He played first base and left in college. He hits well off of righties as expected. He struggles against lefties. So, Dustin, that's where a platoon with Wisdom could really be something that Cub fans could be interested in, because we know Wisdom obviously is the opposite. He's a righty who hits really well off of lefties. And so you got a guy with Wisdom who can hit for 20 some home runs. And if you get a guy like, Busch, who can maybe, I don't know, it's projecting, but if he can maybe hit 20 home runs, which isn't a lot for a first baseman, right? But between the two of them, you might be able to get 40, 45 home runs out of the first base position.
Yeah. And that's, you live with that, right? It's just a matter of how many strikeouts go along with that, right?
Right. But you got to get, there has to just be some fear in that some guy's going to take you deep. And when Wisdom gets hot, he gets hot. And and hopefully Busch can do the same. But, there's still players out there. There's wins that are we could still have. We created this chart to kind of take a look at everything. And a lot of those names are still out there. When you look at
a lot of those names are still out there.
Right. Blake Snell, Jordan Montgomery, Matt Chapman, Cody Bellinger. But Dustin, when you talked about the prospects, and I know sometimes we fall in love with our own prospects, there's just something in me that keeps thinking that maybe they just don't want to make a big splash and block guys. Where you're talking about Matt Shaw, one of their top prospects, is going to be playing more third. Some of those guys. Now, first base, I mean, Busch is a guy, but if you're telling me that you can get Cody Bellinger and he'd be happy playing first, I would be happy with that decision 100%. I still think I don't think Matt Chapman's coming. I still think Cody Bellinger is going to be a Cub. I could be wrong. And again, Bellinger was clearly the elephant in the room at CubsCon, and you have to be careful about what you say. But I think that Jed Hoyer summed it up perfectly when he said this about Cody Bellinger.
No, I think in general you have to. There's a lot of paths that can lead to winning. There's not one path that leads to winning. Obviously. I really like Cody. We've got a great relationship, and he's a great player. But yeah, all roads can't lead that direction. You have to have a lot of contingencies, and that's not just about him. It's about anyone. That if you build a team where one player gets hurt and you can't win, that's not a very good team. This isn't the NBA. You got to build a team that has depth. You got to build a team that, if someone goes down, you have to have a next man up mentality, and depth is really important. So, if you can't build a team that if you take one player off that team, they're not very good. We have to look at free agency kind of the same way. So I think that's how I see it. There's a lot of paths for us to be really good. I'm excited about our team. And, we have more moves in store this offseason for sure. We're certainly not done, but it can't be a one player makes the offseason type deal.
Dustin, if Shohei Ohtani got injured in April, would you still think the Dodgers are favorites to win the World Series?
I don't know about win the World Series, but definitely be in the postseason still, yeah.
Yeah, I would say get far. If you remember when the Braves won a few years ago, Ronald Acuna was injured. He didn't play, and they still won the World Series.
Right.
It makes sense, but you have to have a lot of talented players. I don't think the Cubs there are yet. There's got to be some more moves, because as of right now, the Cubs' biggest move was signing manager Craig Counsell away from the Brewers. And we'll dive deeper into what Craig had to say at CubsCon on the next podcast.
You are listening to the Fly the W670 podcast, season 3, episode 6. Jed and Carter on the 2023, the offseason, and the path moving forward. Don't forget to listen, download, subscribe to the Fly the W podcast. Of course, we'd ask you to leave a 5-star review. Baseball Prospectus, Crawly, has just released their top 101 prospects, and let's just say the future looks bright for Cub fans. In this segment, you are talking to Jeffrey Paternostro, lead prospect writer of Baseball Prospectus, to talk about the young and up-and-coming Cubs.
Joining me now on the Fly the W podcast, we're pleased to have on Jeffrey Paternostro, lead writer for Baseball Prospectus. Jeffrey, how you doing tonight?
Good. We're getting to the end of the prospect season. I guess it is. Our last list goes up a week from Monday. We just published the 101, so close to the finish line.
Yeah, and we appreciate all the work you do, kind of keeping us informed. But I got to ask you, why 101 instead of 100? Is there a reason?
There is one. I don't know it. That goes back to Kevin Goldstein, who was lead prospect writer for prospect writers before me. I think that's right, 4 or 5. I assume it is. It just, it's one more than 100, right? It's like a marketing thing, more or less. So we had one extra name to the end.
It works, but I always tell Cub fans, hey, the future looks bright. It was weird. We got in that weird, 2021, and you're selling off World Series heroes, and you're just kind of looking at Jed Hoyer, what are you doing here? And at the time, there's a lot of frustration, but now you're kind of seeing a little bit of, the fruits of all that labor, whether it be trades, whether it be good drafting, whether it be good development. On the last list, the Cubs had the most prospects on your top 101 list with 9 prospects. That is an unbelievable amount of prospects, at least in my opinion.
I mean, it's one of the higher. I think we probably had maybe 9 Padres at one point, or 9 Rays, something when they were the system with their peak in the late 2010s. But yeah, this is a very, very strong system. And it's not just, sometimes like the Cardinals have 6 names, and sometimes there was nobody else really in consideration. But the Cubs have 9, and I have 9. They had 8, and then they had 9 because they traded for Michael Busch. But even the names beyond that initial group, Jefferson Rojas, Jackson Ferris had some support within our staff, and were discussed in the list process. So it does go even deeper than that.
Right. And so I'm just going to kind of go backwards from the highest and get us to the top rated Cubs here. We start out at number 91 with 91, right? 94. Jordan Wicks at 94. And we had a chance to see a little bit of Jordan Wicks in the majors. I want to say 7 starts. And, it looked like he was able to hold his own. And you got to figure he's going to be up probably one of the first guys to get called up if there's a need, right?
Yeah, absolutely. He could, injuries happen in spring training. He could be, it's not impossible. He's in the opening day rotation. He's a difficult type of prospect to rate, I should say. That sort of major league ready, he's not going to be a top of the rotation starter with that stuff, but he's going to be a major league starter, probably a good one. He's ready, former first round pick, so he's not kind of out of nowhere or unheralded or anything like that, but just been very steady throughout his minor league career. You look, college arm, college lefty, good changeup, never really had any issues at any level in the minors, because you're a college lefty with a good changeup, you're any guy swinging through that. But also never really dominated a level to the point where you're like, okay, this is a potential top of the rotation starter, one of the best pitching prospects in baseball. And he's been around this range on Cubs lists over the last few years, really since he's been drafted, a little bit higher, a little bit lower as the strengths of the system have ebbed and flowed. But just a really good major league ready arm that I think can start. And you'll see a lot of these names in that area, and even the top 50 are guys that don't have a ton of minor league track record, either from injuries or just your younger pitchers that have been brought around slowly. But Wicks, I think, is ready to take the ball every 5th day at some point in the season and be a pretty above average major league starter when he does it.
I can't complain with that. Now, a guy that, comes a little different right out of high school, James Triantos, and was at number 91. And I remember I interviewed him when he started out at Myrtle Beach in low A. And I'm just thinking to myself, my God, this, just so young. He's 18 years old.
Yeah.
And then, I really feel like, a lot of people really started paying attention to him after this recent Arizona Fall League.
Yeah. We liked him out of the draft. He was a name that actually got highlighted for us as, a guy to keep an eye on, right? Second round pick or maybe supplemental first, but not a particularly high draft pick, but a guy that can just really hit. And you mentioned, Myrtle Beach, it's a very difficult place to hit. And I think because of that, his 2022 stat line wasn't as impressive as you might have hoped. But again, high school bat, going right into full season ball, held his own, really hit better this year. Nathan Graham, who sees a lot of our Midwest League coverage, saw him and really liked the bat. And yes, the Arizona Fall League, you got more scouts and prospect writers per capita in one spot than you'll get any other time during the year. So if you showcase there, guys are going to take notice. But I think the breakout for him really started earlier in the season. He's another one too, where it's tough. There's not a ton of power. He did start to hit the ball a little bit harder this year. So again, early 20s, you can see power growth is not uncommon in those ages. So maybe there's a little bit more there, but I don't know if he's going to really be a slugger, not really going to be a shortstop, but again, a very nice everyday player.
Right. I guess for Cub fans, everyone's just kind of trying to figure out where the glove would play. You know what I mean? I know they tried him out a little bit in center field in the AFL and stuff like that. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. Now,
I think his best position, I think, is second base. Obviously, that's going to be occupied for a bit, but he is enough of an athlete that I think you could definitely play him in the outfield. He can play some third base too. So, and it may be a guy that just moves around as needed.
All right. Moises Ballesteros, first time on your list at 84. I saw Moises at Myrtle Beach this year. I went and I saw him and Michael Arias, and that was a fun combination to watch. But I mean, he's another young guy that to me, though, just showed a lot of maturity beyond his years. Just really kind of seemed to be the field general, if you will, down there.
Yeah, I said it is hard to hit at Myrtle Beach. It was not that hard to hit at Myrtle Beach for Ballesteros this year. Yeah, he's another one. He came onto our radar pretty quickly. You just don't find this kind of bat or this potential bat in a catcher. When we were going through the list process and comparing him to Samuel Basayo, who's a top 15 prospect in the Orioles system right now, kind of similar trajectory. Ballesteros is a little bit older, but the same kind of wow, this is everything's here offensively. He's very precocious for his age. It's good contact rates. The approach is good. The swing decisions are good. There's already present power there and maybe some more to come. And then the question with this kind of prospect is, can he stick at catcher? And he's pretty good for his age. Big guy, but again, somebody that Nathan saw this year a fair bit in the high A, and gave him a chance, right? It wasn't like, okay, he's going to be a first baseman. There's decent amount of flexibility back there. He moves well, he throws well, he receives well. You've got building blocks there. A lot of these catcher defensive skills are very teachable too. You can see, you have the Brewers come to town a lot, and the Brewers are able to really develop these defensive catcher skills. And the other hidden thing, and we don't consider this for our list, and we've talked about it the last couple of years, and it does make sort of long-term catcher evaluation, and that applies to Ballesteros, who's probably still a year or two away. It's what's it going to look like if there's automated ball strikes in the majors? And basically the way we evaluate catcher defensive profiles has to completely change. And teams are going to have to figure that out too. If Ballesteros' receiving doesn't quite get there, but he doesn't have to worry about that. He's a good catch and throw guy. The bat's good. That really does change the defensive outlook. But that's a global thing that you really just can't consider when evaluating. You have to kind of assume that it's going to be what it is. And it's going to be a process for him, but he's got a shot to stick at catcher and be a middle of the lineup bat doing it.
Right. Now, I just came from Cubs convention last weekend, and all the prospects were up there. And there's one guy, and I've seen him around. I've seen him at Cubs convention. I've seen him play. Kevin Alcantara is just a guy that just, I don't know. He stands out, and you got him at number 80. I mean, it's some guys you're hey, is that a ball player? Is that if Kevin Alcantara, that's a physical freak right there, specimen right there.
And really since the Rizzo trade. Like we had looks on him going back to his time in the Yankees complex, and the tools have always been there. It's just a guy with limbs that long. There's so many levers in the swing. You do wonder, like, what's the swing and miss going to be like? And we'll talk about that with Owen Casey a little bit too. But just the power potential there is frightening. And he is a guy where he improved over the course of the season. So his numbers are a little, he was better than his numbers, like a better prospect than perhaps his numbers show because of that improvement at high A over the course of the season.
Yeah, I was talking to Brendan King, one of the play-by-play announcers for the South Bend Cubs, and he was telling me, look, that first month, and I've been to South Bend
it's
in
nice,
April.
yeah.
That's a real tough adjustment to make.
Yeah, it is.
And then what BK told me is the second April's done, all of a sudden he's hitting 500-foot bombs. That's just what he does, and it's really fun to watch. Now, probably the Cubs prospect that we're all at least familiar with, at least in Cubs world right now, is Michael Busch. Just got him the other day in the Jackson Ferris deal. Tell us a little bit about Michael Busch. And, obviously he blocked a lot as far as in Dodger land, but what is he like as far as a player is concerned?
So he is a very good hitter. Again, you look at his stats have always been good. And he's like the Dodgers brought him along very slowly because the Dodgers do tend to do that with their hitters. And also because, they just didn't really have a place for him on the major league roster over the last couple of years, where in most organizations, he would have been the everyday second baseman, or the everyday third baseman, or the everyday left fielder. Like you would have just found a spot for the bat. His approach is excellent. He hits the ball pretty hard. He's like a 25 home run guy, probably, maybe even a little bit more. The question with him is going to be, and we haven't seen it, it's very little time at the majors. He got a cup of coffee with the Dodgers. Didn't play great, and again, it wasn't necessarily getting regular playing time or having a clearly defined role on that team because the Dodgers just didn't really have room for him last year. Is that can he handle major league velocity? And that's kind of been the question there, like 95 plus. Does he have the bat speed for it? And it's one of those things where you don't know until he's playing there day in and day out. But he's very good at picking what pitches to swing at. And he's very good at doing damage when he does. So maybe the batting average won't be super high, but he'll get on base. He can hit for power. I guess the Cubs are talking about playing him at first base, which it's fine. You'd rather he can play second, third, or left, but really you're just trying to get the bat in the lineup and hoping he can be a middle of the order hitter for you.
Well, right now the Cubs are looking for a first baseman and a third baseman, so hopefully one of those works. And then Owen Casey is at 65, and I said, boy, the last kind of the Yu Darvish trade and seeing what he did with England, Great Britain, and the World Baseball, or I'm sorry, with Canada and the World Baseball Classic, it just really felt like, the spotlight's never too big for him. He just has a confidence in him that is fun to watch.
So I've liked him a lot, even since the draft. And he was the guy that did get flagged to me, Canadian prep. So maybe a little more raw in baseball terms. But you just watch his batting practice and you watch the ball jump off his bat and whatever. He's had strikeout issues in the minors pretty much every year. And I say strikeout issues, like he's going to strike out, only 25, 30% of the time in the majors when he gets there. But he just does so much damage when he makes contact. And that's one of those things where that will cover for a lot of other flaws if you hit the ball as hard as he does. Like he still has to hit it a little more often, but he's a good right fielder, good athlete, good arm. And he is, we talk a lot about middle of the order hitters. So all right, this is a cleanup hitter. This is the guy that can hit 30 plus home runs for you. And look, the swing and miss can eat into that. We still need to see him in the upper minors in a little more extended period. And he's got to go step by step. But it's the guy for me, outside of we ranked him the highest outside of the top two bats. But this is a guy that sometimes it's okay, we talked about Jordan Wicks and James Triantos, who are pretty safe major leaguers. Michael Busch is that too. This is the guy where you're dreaming on the upside, and the high end outcomes here are, perennial all-star.
Wow, that's exciting to hear. And that, like you said, we're getting in the 60s to the 90s is what we were just talking about in this tier, but then you kind of jump up, and this is where it really gets interesting for me because everybody has been super excited about Cade Horton and what he's been able to do since coming through the Cubs. I mean, just flying through the system and being part of the Tennessee Smoky championship. You got him at 27. And I mean, he looks like a high-end starter. I mean, he just looks like the real deal right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And when the Cubs drafted him last year, I was like, that was a pick that raised a couple eyebrows, right? Not a guy that had a ton of college success, had dominated at the end of the season and in the College World Series with a new slider. But you're kind of like, okay, is that a starter? Like, that's pretty early for Cade Horton. And that was the feeling I got from some amateur scouts I talked to. It's like, yeah, I liked him, but I would have, I liked him in the 20s. Where you kind of see that picture taken. And then this year was just from almost day one, really, I was getting reports that like, oh, this is for real. And the other thing too is there were very few, and this is something that again happens in cycles. There were very few starting pitching prospects this year that were this good as Horton was, and threw as much as Horton did. He didn't throw a ton, but he was healthy the entire season, and he was sort of stretched out as you would stretch out a top level pitching prospect. There just aren't that many. Up until Paul Skeens was drafted, Andrew Painter in the Phillies organization we had him as the best pitching prospect. He didn't pitch all year from Tommy John surgery. You can look in a few of the names ahead of him. Ricky Tiedemann had arm issues this year as well. So it's just unusual to find at least at this time around, find a pitching prospect that combines his stuff, his level of performance, and his. I hesitate to use the word durability because he threw like 100 innings, but that was this level of health, I guess. It's a guy again that could certainly be a 2024 impact arm in that rotation at some point.
Now, a lot of people have been talking about Horton as the number 2 prospect. A couple of people put him as the number 1 Cubs prospect, but you guys had Matt Shaw ahead of him at 21. Another guy that just, absolutely tore it up this year in the minors. Again, came up as a part of that group that helped Tennessee Smokies win it all, and just a fun young bat. And the question, I guess, for a lot of Cubs fans is, can he play third? Will the glove play at third? That's the big question. And if you can get Nick Magical to play a decent third base, hopefully you can do the same on Matt Shaw, right?
Right. I will say at the outset, like I don't have a problem with somebody's telling me Cade Horton's the best prospect in this system. Right. I think these three are all pretty close, and they're all a tier above the other names we've talked about so far. And Shaw and Horton actually have a lot in common because I liked the Shaw pick. We liked Shaw going into the draft, but it's another guy where they got a prospect, I think, a little bit better than you expected at that pick, right? With that name, right? Because like Matt Shaw was a good college hitter. We had him like a tier behind Tommy Troy and Chase Davis, of the tier behind Wyatt Langford and Dylan Cruz. But I caught him. I did catch a game of his actually in the complex when I was down in Arizona. I think it might have actually been his pro debut. And it's one of those things. This is very qualitative. Obviously, I have talked to the amateur scouts, and we again, I believe Dathan saw him briefly as well in the Midwest League. But I have all like the data, the reports to back this up. But it was also like one at bat in, I'm like, that's a major leaguer. And that's like very qualitative and like more art than science, but you could just see it with the bat. I think he was DHing. I don't think he was playing the field at the time, but it was just like, oh, this is not just like a first round pick. This is the top of the first round pick. And it was kind of that obvious. I think he'll be fine at third base. When I worked him up on video, I didn't mind him at shortstop. I don't think he was going to be a major league shortstop, but he could play there for you in a pinch. So I think everything will translate fine to third. I don't think that'll really be an issue there. It will put a little bit more pressure on the bat. And again, he's another guy we need to see. There were we had him a little higher on earlier drafts of the 101 to just a little insight into how the sausage is made. And we got a little bit of pushback just from sort of shopping that ranking around, where it's like, there's some concern about the swing decisions, basically the approach at this point against better pitching. And again, you don't know until you see it. And he had a very small post-draft pro sample. So that we cooled our jets a little bit there, but this is another guy where I think there is star potential overall in the profile.
Well, speaking of star potential, you know, when you can go by 3 initials and everybody knows who you are, I think that really kind of helps the situation. The highest ranked Cub at number 20, Pete Crow Armstrong. Like I said, I was at Cubs convention this last weekend. He had the fro hawk going on. So he had the curls and I mean, it was a whole thing.
Baseball players, minorities have a lot of time on their hands to do things like that, I find.
You know, he kind of joked about it. I saw him one time. He had his head shaved, you know, dyed blue. I mean, he's just an electric kind of player. And it's so funny when he got called up and then they were playing in Colorado in that giant outfield.
Yeah.
I swear to God, it was like the Flash. It was like a lightning bolt going out of there that sometimes I think the corner outfielders got spooked that they just couldn't believe he was there that quick right there on the play, backing it up. And I also kind of laugh a little bit is that there were some people frustrated. Oh, look at the offense. He had 19 at bats at the major league level. And most of them were against like setup guys and closers. Are you kidding me?
Yeah. I mean, look, you can have concerns about how much he is going to hit, but he is going to be such a great center field defender. I think that's something that can be difficult to really suss out when you're making a prospect list, right? Like I can talk about like Matt Shaw is probably going to be fine at third base. Like James Giantos is probably going to be, all these guys are kind of in the like average, slightly above, slightly below bucket, and really rating and like comparing, I guess, an elite defensive tool to offensive tools and more offensive oriented players can be difficult just because we just know so much more about what what a 300 hitter is and what that value is, what that offense and sort of how the underlying offensive tools we can look at, and not just hit and power, but even drilling down further into things like very granular contact rates and launch angle and exit velocities and things like that. We just have like it, not that, to be clear, not that Pete Crow Armstrong is a difficult scout defensively. He's going to probably win some gold gloves in the majors, but just how do you want to value that against Matt Shaw, who might hit 290 with 25 home runs every year. Well, PCA might hit more 250 with 15 to 20 because he hits the ball pretty hard, but there are some contact issues because he's a very aggressive free swinger. And again, that's something that he's going to have to, I think, tamp down a little bit in the majors, given more reps. But again, he really just needs to hit enough to keep the glove in the lineup, which is usually it's the other way around, right? You just got to find him a position because you want to get the bat in the lineup. But his defense is so good that I think he's going to be an everyday player, even if he's, 10% better than or worse than league average hitter. And I think he can get to at least that. And I think there is some sneaky upside in the power too, because he does hit the ball pretty hard for what's not a particularly, big framed guy.
Yeah, it's interesting. I listened to Craig Counsell speak, and I asked him about bunting because that was something that kind of frustrated Cub fans with David Ross, the previous manager. And it's weird because he did bring up PCA. He said, he didn't like asking people that probably weren't good bunters, to do it. But with PCA, he's like, I think that could be part of his game, and that kind of surprised me a little bit. But again, if you've seen the speed,
he's
that could be
a very good runner. Yeah.
Yeah, well, Jeffrey, I really appreciate you taking some time out. And when you look at this Cubs system, we got these players, these 9 players that are on here, and they're exciting. But I think the thing to me that's different than the last time the Cubs really kind of went on a run is, one, the depth in the system. Because like you said, there's guys that aren't on this list. But, when some of these other guys graduate, like Jordan Wicks, et cetera, PCA, there's going to be other guys that are going to get added to this list. And the other thing that really sticks out to me is the way that before in 2013, 14, 15, I could name you 10 to 20 Cubs hitters I was excited about. I couldn't name you 5 pitchers to save the life of me that I was really excited about. And I think the Cubs have done a good job at developing that. Yeah,
that's one of the bigger changes in the organization recently. Look, they're not the Guardians, they're not the Rays, they're not the Yankees, but they have done a pretty good job bringing along a lot of interesting arms in the last few seasons. And some of them have even turned into relievers, and that's fine too. Like the ability to internally fill your own relief depth and not have to go out and, on the free agent market and pay free agent rates, or even just the variation you'll get sometimes year to year with relievers. It's a positive marker, I think, long term. And they were just missed out on a playoff spot last year. We had them as I had to do org rankings for the annual, and we had them 3rd before the Michael Busch trade. I think they're actually second because I had the Dodgers second. So it was that close when I was thinking about it. So that'll flip when we publish them on site. And again, this is not just they have the major league ready guys, right? So you have Pico Armstrong and you have Jordan Wicks. You have the guys in the lower minors that are exciting to keep an eye on. I mean, Matt Shaw kind of counts in that. I know he got to AA, but he's a recent draftee. So you have guys that are maybe a year away, 2 years away. You have guys that are further away too. Someone like Michael Arias, who you mentioned. So it's a pipeline, and it's guys that have it's what I call it's a very well balanced system, right? It's guys that have upside, it's guys that have major league floor, it's pitchers, it's hitters. It's not just going to come in one 2 or 3 year window, and then you have to kind of figure out what you have from there and where you need to fill in holes. You can just have the sustainable pipeline of prospects. And look, they'll go out and spend money. I do think they will. Maybe not as much as Cubs fans would like, but they will. I think they will go out in free agency and fill the holes. And I think they're pretty well positioned to make a little bit of a run back to contention, and even the NL Central this year. That's always a winnable division.
Well, Jeffrey, you've given me a lot to think about and a lot to get excited about. Why don't you tell our listeners where they can find your work and where you are on the socials? Sure.
It's baseballprospectus.com. We're just wrapping up our prospect list, but you can check out all 30 teams, the 101. We have scouting reports for 21 players in each organization. Some not as exciting as the Cubs, to be honest, but they're all there. We also are starting season previews soon. Pacoda week, so all our projections I think are going to roll out the first week in February as well. I go on a well-earned sabbatical for a few weeks after that, at least until the prospect showcases start up in March in Arizona. But in the interim, you can find me on Twitter at Jeff Paternostro.
Well, Jeff, I appreciate it. And trust me, anytime you have such good news, you're welcome on the show. Even if you don't, we'd love to have you on.
It'll be good for a while, I think. So.
All right, then we'd be looking forward to seeing you again. Jeffrey, thank you so much for jumping on.
Thank you.
This is episode 6 of season 3 of the Fly the W670 podcast. Crawly, great job with that interview. Don't forget to listen, download, and subscribe to the Fly the W podcast. And don't forget, leave us a 5-star review. All right, Crawly. We talk about players from CubsCon and all the fun, the bingo and the autographs, but there's some other news that comes out of that event.
Yeah, this was on 670 The Score. You had Crane Kenny. There was no business ops, which was always one of my favorites. And that's where stuff like this would come out.
Of course. Right. Yeah.
But David Hall was on it. And so there's a couple questions that he was able to get to. And I think one of them was the Winter Classic. And Dustin, I know you're definitely a bigger hockey guy than I am. But one of my regrets, I would say, is I had an opportunity to go to that first Winter Classic, and I did not go. I am not a guy that would want to be sitting in the freezing snow. But it looked like a fun experience, but I never went to that Winter Classic. So this is what Crane had to say about it.
Did you say hockey game?
Yeah, we had one in 09. And
I know. Is there one coming? Because just go back to connect the dots. There was a report after the Winter Classic this year in Seattle with the Kraken that the Blackhawks might be in line because of a young man named Connor Bedard. And Chicago makes a lot of sense for the NHL to look at because of those realities. Wrigley Field makes a lot of sense because of your history hosting hockey games. Is that a realistic possibility?
Yeah, we're very hopeful. So I'd say, we put our hat in the ring for things like the MLB All-Star Game. Clearly, we put our hat in the ring for a Winter Classic. We love having our Northwestern games next year with the renovation of their building. We may have more than one. So we did Top Golf this year. We'll do that again, I think, at least once, maybe twice. That was a huge success. So, yeah, but we threw our hat in the ring on the Winter Classic. We're hopeful there.
All right. Would you like to see Connor Bedard at Wrigley Field? Have you been to a Winter Classic?
I have never been. I've watched plenty of them on television, but never have been.
All right. Well, if you want tickets, let me know early, and I'll make sure to put some aside. And maybe that's a field trip over to see that. I don't know. I don't even have I think I have a Cubs hockey jersey or sweater. It's called a sweater. I think I can find
sweater. Yeah, sweater. Yeah. Yeah. I'm sure you've got a Cubs knit cap, and I'm sure you've got a Cubs scarf, and all the things you would need to build a Crawly Blackhawk snowman. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. That's something right there. But All-Star Game, they're talking about security measures, Dustin, still, and I still just think it's ridiculous. The earliest the Cubs can have the All-Star Game is 2027. The last time that the Cubs hosted the All-Star Game, Ryne Sandberg was the winner of the home run derby with 3. That's 19.
Isn't that amazing? That's amazing. That's an amazing statistic right there. You win a lot of bar bets with that one.
Right. And you just think about all the beauty, how Wrigley looks so different from 1990. Like if you were brought down from like a space shuttle, I mean, it looks similar, but the whole area inside, outside, around the ballpark looks so much better. It is ridiculous that the Cubs have to keep waiting. 2027. I'm not getting any younger, Dustin. I want to get this thing going.
Don't start that. Don't start that.
I want an All-Star Game.
All of our biological clocks are ticking, but don't get your countdown clock on just yet.
Now, speaking of Sandberg, we know I went to the session with our friend Lucella. He's been on the podcast before. For everyone, subscribe to the YouTube channel on 670 The Score. This is a picture right here of myself with Lucella, and that's a bust of the Ernie Banks statue. It's gigantic.
Cool.
It was
That's
there.
cool.
And then what he kind of showed us in this was, the glove, and then if you got to see it up close, the Rawlings glove that he had and the Franklin batting glove, it's just absolutely amazing. So, I mean, obviously they're going to do this on June 23rd. Now the question is that going to be a day game or a night game? That's going to affect things. But if you have not sold your tickets for June 23rd, I would put them in your pocket and make sure you don't get rid of them, because that is going to be amazing. There's going to be tons of players from the 1984 team that are going to be there to support their teammate, the first 1960s Cub player to get their statue.
Yep, it's a cool one. It's one that I'm really curious to see how it turns out.
Now, speaking of second baseman, Dustin, I don't know if you were watching the MLB Network the other day. Top 10 second baseman right now. The Cubs' Nico Hoerner comes in. This is by the experts. This is not by the fans, although the fans voted him 10th place too. But the experts voted him 10th place. Do you really think there's 10 better second basemen than Nico Hoerner?
I'd have to take a real deep dive into that formula to figure that out. But do I think? No, I do not. I do not agree with that. Not even a little tiny bit.
I mean, is Mookie Betts, would you consider him a second baseman? I mean,
well, that's the problem, right? I mean, Mookie Betts is a better baseball player, okay, than Nico Hoerner is, right?
Mm-hmm.
He's a better baseball player, but he's not a second baseman. That's really not. Is that really his position? Fine. But then that's the only position you can judge him in. Okay? That's it. Right. But again, I mean, Matt McClain's better than Nico Hoerner, really?
Or Zach Geloff?
Well, I'm saying I'm starting there. I'm saying that I feel like you could slide him in 5th or 6th and move everybody down a peg.
100% agree with you on that. And I think a lot of it is about, sometimes with prospects, people get excited, but some of these guys haven't proven anything yet, where I feel like Nico has proved plenty. He did really well at shortstop, and we knew he would get that Gold Glove in second, and he was a finalist for the Gold Glove before too. So I just don't understand how, if a guy, was in the running one year and was the winner this year, how he can't be any better than 10. All the stolen bases this year and just a solid hitter all around. I just don't see how that works out, but that's just me. We do have goodbyes to say to Marcus Stroman. Dustin, we weren't sure exactly what was going to happen with Stro. He opted out of his Cubs deal, and we were kind of shocked. That was what, $22 million. But I think it's going to be pretty strange because, he did not leave on the best term with the Mets. So he is a native New Yorker, and he is a guy that in general, he's very chirpy on social media. So I would be very curious to see how that reunion is going to work out. I don't know what you're thinking, but it's going to be very interesting. It is a 2-year deal on that one. So it's going to be $37 million invested, 18 for 26 if Stro reaches 140 innings pitched in 2025. So, hey, you know what? Good on Stro. He bet on himself once again, and he did it. So guaranteed.
It's a great way. He bet on himself once again. Yep.
And here's the thing: when you're as short as he is, and I'm not a tall guy, Dustin, and I'm basically I would say slightly taller, about even as him. And to think that guy's throwing Major League Baseball against the best physical athletes in the world,
pretty impressive. Yep, pretty impressive.
Definitely
he's beating some stereotypes, no doubt about it.
Well, this was he had a Instagram story that he put out. Shout to Chicago and the entire Cubs fan base organization. Incredible city. Loved every moment being there. Pitching at Wrigley was electric each and every time. Very thankful to have competed for one of the most historic franchises. Grateful for the coaches, my teammates and staff there, all amazing human beings. Thank you for the support and love over the last few years. I will say this about Marcus is through our work in Club 400, we were able to do a charity event for the Lost Boys, a great group if you can support that helps kids in the South Side, underprivileged kids with baseball, life in general, but through baseball. Baseball's kind of the hook to get the kids in, but they do reading, they do life skills, all sorts of things. Just a phenomenal group. And I saw Marcus come another time to the Lost Boys headquarters and read his book, The Grip, and he gave all the kids a free copy. He paid for uniforms for the kids. He did a lot that didn't get reported. And, I'm just a little guy on Twitter or something like that. I put out what I can, but he did a lot of things that just didn't get a ton of press that I think I will think that it was great that he was able to do that.
Yeah, very cool. Yep. And it's good that he's willing to do that stuff and he's not just doing it to get ink, if you will.
Nope, absolutely. One final note, our friend, Odyssey Insider, Bob Nightingale was the first to post it.
All right.
We got our first workout dates, Cub fans, February 14th. Pitchers and catchers report. If that's not true love, I don't know what is on Valentine's Day.
I'm sure your wife just loves how in love you are with the Cubs, Crawly.
Oh yeah, that's been a few therapy sessions, but I regress. I am ready for pitchers. Like I said, Cubs Con's done. We're gonna be focusing pitchers and catchers. Man, it's almost there.
Almost there. It's right down the old calendar. You can get a little warm, but things are warming up around here. Thankfully, it's not punishment to go outside. Well, that's a wrap. Don't forget to listen, download, review, and subscribe to the Fly the W podcast. We're on all the socials, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. You can email Crawly and I, flythew670gmail.com, and watch us. That's right. Watch us on the YouTube channel by subscribing to the Scores YouTube page. Crawly, have a fantastic weekend. We'll be following all the Cubs news, and we'll be right back at it with everybody on Monday.
Jed is not done, ladies and gentlemen. Let Jed cook. Go Cubs! Hey guys, it's Crawly. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more content like this. If you want to see more of our videos, be sure to check out our playlist and let us know what you think in the comments below. Also, don't forget to follow us on social media to stay up to date with our latest episodes. Links are in the description. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you in the next video. Go Cubs!